Hey everyone, today we are looking into Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria of Great Britain. However, despite coming from one of Europe's foremost royal dynasties, her life was blighted by several tragedies and events, from a troubled marriage to genetic illness. While in the early 1930s, she was caught up in one of the most seismic political events of Europe during the interwar period. This is her story. But before we dive into her life, I want to thank Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Forget boring lectures and slow ways of learning. To learn effectively, you need to do things yourself and learn interactively. This is why Brilliant is the best way to make information stick, widening your knowledge and boosting your creative problem-solving skills. Brilliant has a ton of great interactive courses on math, science, problem solving and more. Personally, I really like the casino probability course. For me it's just really interesting, and I've been interested in casino games for quite a while, and fun fact, I actually really like watching poker. And although Victoria Eugenie didn't hit the jackpot in all aspects of her life, as we will see, I'm sure you can increase your chances by checking out Brilliant and getting started on the incredible courses that they have to offer. Join the millions of people already learning on Brilliant by going to brilliant.org/forgotten lives to get started for free with Brilliant's interactive lessons. And also, the first 200 subscribers will get 20% off an annual membership. Princess Victoria Eugenie Juliana was born on the 24th of October 1887 at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She was the daughter of Prince Henry of Battenberg, the son of Prince Alexander of Hessen in Western Germany. Henry's mother was the Countess Julia von Hauck, a member of a middling German Polish noble family. Because Prince Alexander had married below his station as a royal prince, his and Julia's marriage was considered a morganatic marriage in the 19th century, a marriage between two people of unequal social status. As a result of this, Henry, as their son, was not granted one of their principality's ancient titles from his father, but became known as Prince Henry of Battenberg, and he would later pass that title on to his daughter, Princess Victoria Eugenie. Victoria Eugenie's mother was Princess Beatrice, the fifth daughter of Queen Victoria I of Great Britain and Ireland. She soon became known to her family as Ina, the last of her names, while she was also referred to as the Jubilee Baby, in acknowledgement of having been born during the 50th year of Queen Victoria's reign. This also accounts for her parents' decision to name her after her grandmother. The young princess grew up in Queen Victoria's household. This was an unusual situation, but is accounted for by how attached the Queen was to Princess Beatrice, who was her youngest child. The aging Queen had only granted permission to Beatrice to marry Prince Henry on the condition that she would continue to live with her and act as her secretary. Therefore, Victoria Eugenie's youth was spent at various royal residences in England and Scotland, and she developed a close relationship with her grandmother. When Victoria died in 1901, after 64 years on the throne, Princess Beatrice moved with her children to Kensington Palace in London, her husband having died in 1896 after contracting malaria while on military service in Africa. The issue of Princess Victoria's marriage arose in 1905 when she was near her 18th birthday. That year, King Alfonso XIII of Spain visited Britain. At 19 years of age, Alfonso was just a year and a half older than Victoria, but he had already been king for nearly 2 decades at this point. His father, King Alfonso XII, had died a few months before Alfonso was born. Thus, Alfonso Jr. had become King of Spain at the time of his birth. When he arrived to England in 1905, it was well known that Alfonso was looking to get married soon, and there were rumours of a possible marriage to Princess Patricia of Connacht, a first cousin of Victoria's. However, At a state dinner at Buckingham Palace, it was Victoria who caught his eye. Yet there were a number of roadblocks to any potential union. Firstly, Victoria was an Anglican Protestant, and her religion would be problematic for any potential queen of ultra-Roman Catholic Spain. Secondly, there was a possibility that Victoria was a carrier of a rare blood disease called haemophilia, which was prominent in the British royal family at this time. If she was, it could be passed on to any children she and Alfonso might have. These problems, though, were soon overcome. Victoria agreed to convert to Roman Catholicism, while Alfonso was willing to take the risk in regard to the familial prevalence of haemophilia, though, as we will shortly see, this became a major issue in later years. With these obstacles overcome, Victoria visited Spain with her mother early in 1906, where they were hosted by Alfonso and met his mother. Behind the scenes, official dynastic arrangements and marriage terms were agreed to between the British and Spanish governments. With all this in place, the marriage was set for the 31st of May 1906, and it would be celebrated in Madrid. There would, though, be one final incident in this difficult engagement process. On the day of Alfonso and Victoria's marriage, a Spanish anarchist by the name of Mateo Morral attempted to assassinate the young king and queen by throwing a bomb disguised as a floral bouquet at them from a hotel window in central Madrid as the royal procession was making its way through the city. The royal couple were unhurt, but 24 bystanders were killed and over 100 others were injured. It boded ill for their marriage and foreshadowed the political conflict which would characterize Spanish political life in the decades that followed. Unfortunately, Victoria Eugenie's fortunes did not improve after she became Queen of Spain. She found her new homeland hard to adjust to and was unpopular amongst her new subjects, who regarded her somewhat suspiciously as a Protestant interloper who had simply converted for the sake of convenience. Things grew worse when, on the 10th of May 1907, less than a year after they were married, Victoria gave birth to a son named Alfonso, after his father. While the arrival of their first child should have been a moment for celebration for the royal couple, it soon turned sour. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, the British royal family and many other European royal families had their male children circumcised. When young Alfonso was circumcised, the doctors soon reported that he kept bleeding afterwards. The prince had evidently inherited Victoria's haemophilia. Haemophilia is a condition in which an individual's blood does not clot properly. It is typically inherited genetically from generation to generation of a family. It is ultimately caused by a mutation or change in the genes an individual has, which instruct the body to make clotting factor proteins when an injury of some kind is suffered and a clot needs to be formed to staunch bleeding. Because the sufferer cannot produce these clotting proteins, even small injuries can result in extensive bleeding, while surgery or serious injuries can be extremely hazardous or even fatal. The severity of an individual's haemophilia is determined by how much of the factor which produces clotting proteins one has in their systems. In the case of Victoria and Alfonso's firstborn child, it would prove to be particularly acute. The British royal family in the 19th and early 20th centuries suffered extensively from the condition, and Victoria Eugenie had been born with it. Her grandmother, Queen Victoria, had been the first carrier, and it had descended to many of her grandchildren. It now became clear in the 1900s that Alfonso had it, and several of Victoria Eugenie's other children would subsequently suffer from the same disease. As a result, the children would have to be protected from injuries. Small bumps and scrapes, which might result in a bruise or small cut for most children, could be extremely damaging to Victoria's children. King Alfonso did not respond well to the news that young Alfonso had haemophilia. It drove a rift between him and his wife, who he blamed for this. Yet they continued to have children, in total 5 sons and 2 daughters. The health difficulties of the family were compounded when their second child, a son named Jaime, was born deaf in 1908, a year after Alfonso's birth. Thus, although their daughters Beatriz and Maria appeared to have escaped inheriting Victoria's haemophilia, the family was plagued by health difficulties. It is perhaps unsurprising to learn that Victoria threw herself into charitable work with hospitals in the years that followed. She patronised the Red Cross in Spain, and in 1929 was honoured by the Catalonian city of Barcelona when they erected a statue of her in the city wearing a nurse's uniform. She also supported educational reform in Spain and provided charity for the poor. All work which saw Pope Pius XI bestow the Golden Rose on her in 1923, a major honour awarded by the Roman Catholic Church to individuals as a token of reverence. While Victoria Eugenie's charitable work proceeded well in the 1910s and 1920s, all was not well in her adopted homeland. Throughout the 19th century, Spain had been experiencing political turmoil between individuals who wanted to reform the country's politics and those who supported a more conservative society that would be dominated by the monarchy and the Roman Catholic Church. This was complicated by the rise of the Spanish armed forces as a major factor in Spanish politics during a series of conflicts in North Africa where Spain was trying to protect its few remaining colonies. By the 1920s, the opposing groups were split broadly into groups of pro-monarchy army elements or nationalists and their republican opponents. To maintain his position as King of Spain, Alfonso had supported Miguel Primo de Rivera as a military governor of the country from 1923 onwards, on the platform of country, religion, monarchy. But finally, in 1930, de Rivera's power slipped as an economic collapse within Spain, following the Wall Street crash in the United States, saw him lose the support of the Spanish military. As a result, in 1931 elections were held which brought the Republicans to power across Spain. Within weeks, they deposed Alfonso and created the Second Spanish Republic, in succession to the monarchy. Alfonso and Victoria Eugenie were suddenly no longer the King and Queen of Spain. Following their deposition, Alfonso and Victoria left Spain altogether. It was believed that their continued presence in the country would prove contentious and could provoke a civil war between the Republicans and those who wanted a restoration of the monarchy. Thus, they went into exile in France in the early 1930s. Nevertheless, their departure did not serve to halt the unrest in Spain. Eventually, the country descended into civil war between the left-leaning Republicans and a right-wing nationalist movement in 1936. The Spanish Civil War would last for 3 years, and eventually resulted in the seizure of power by General Francisco Franco and his Falange movement. Alfonso and Victoria subsequently moved from France to Italy. For a time there was a hope that Franco might restore the monarchy in Spain following the Civil War, but this never materialized. To compound their miseries, their fourth son Gonzalo died in 1934 as a result of a car accident. The injuries which he sustained were minor, but he suffered extensive internal bleeding as a result of his haemophilia, and this led to his death shortly afterwards. Tragically, the exact same fate befell their eldest son Alfonso 4 years later in 1938. Then in 1941, Alfonso, who was in poor health, renounced his claim to the Spanish throne in favour of their third son Juan. The old king died shortly afterwards. Victoria Eugenie's problems continued after Alfonso's death. Prior to this, the couple had been living in Italy, a country which had allied with Germany in the Second World War against Britain. Victoria's support for her homeland was evident to Italian society, and in 1942, she was asked to leave the country. She subsequently relocated to Switzerland, a neutral country in the war, where she spent much of her later years. In 1968, as the Franco regime was liberalizing significantly during the dictator's final years in charge of Spain, she briefly returned to the country for the first time in 37 years. When Franco himself died on the 20th of November 1975, there was widespread popular support for a restoration of the monarchy, and there just 2 days later, on the 22nd of November, Victoria's grandson Juan Carlos became King Juan Carlos I of Spain in a restored monarchy. Today, Victoria's great-grandson Felipe VI is the reigning Spanish monarch. The old queen never lived to see her grandson become king though. Victoria Eugenie died in the Swiss city of Lausanne on the 15th of April 1969. At 81 years of age, she had lived a long life, though one filled with many problems. As the Franco regime was still in place, she was buried in Lausanne. However, in 1985, her grandson ensured that her remains were returned to Spain, and she was interred in the royal vault at the Escorial Palace outside Madrid, next to her husband and their children. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of her life down below in the comments, and if you have any suggestions, also be sure to leave them down in the comments. I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.